I don't know how to start this without sounding insane. But I need to get it out because even though this happened months ago, it still lingers in my mind. Some nights, I wake up gasping for air, convinced I can hear that sound again, that deep, awful, unnatural noise that still makes my skin crawl. I don't know what I saw out there, I don't want to know, but I know it was real. Last fall, I rented a cabin deep in the woods of Montana. I found it online, listed for an absurdly low price. The pictures made it look kind of nice, in that rustic, secluded way, 2 stories, wooden paneling, surrounded by towering pine trees. It had a fireplace, an old wooden staircase, and a little front porch with a single rocking chair. I'd been dealing with a lot of stress at the time, work, relationships, just life in general, and I thought a few weeks of isolation would do me some good. No emails, no social media, no people. Just me, the quiet, and maybe a few good books. When I got there, though, something felt off. I chalked it up to the eeriness of being so isolated. The drive up to the cabin had been long, cutting through miles of dense forest, winding roads that seemed to stretch endlessly into nowhere. By the time I arrived, the sun was starting to dip behind the trees, casting long, creeping shadows across the clearing where the cabin sat. The place smelled like wood and dust, like it hadn't been lived in for a long time. The floorboards groaned under my feet as I walked inside. The windows were foggy, the air was cool, and everything had that strange, forgotten quality, like a house stuck in time. I unpacked, made myself a quick dinner, and tried to settle in. That first night, though, that's when it started. At first, it was just noises, small, almost unnoticeable sounds that could have been written off as the house settling. The occasional soft creak from the floor, a tap against the window that I told myself was just a branch shifting in the wind. I tried not to think too much of it. But as the night stretched on, the sounds became more distinct. I was lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling, when I heard something outside my bedroom door. A single, slow creak, like someone had stepped there and stopped. My whole body went rigid. I held my breath, listening, but everything had gone completely silent. The kind of silence that's almost unnatural, where even the wind seems to hold its breath. For a long time, I just lay there, heart pounding, waiting to hear something else. But after a while, when nothing happened, I forced myself to relax. Old house, old wood, old noises. I repeated that to myself until I finally fell asleep. It wasn't until later that I'd realized the floor outside my bedroom door hadn't creaked like that at any other point that night. And I wasn't the only thing inside that house. The next morning, I woke up groggy and unsettled. The kind of sleep where you wake up still feeling exhausted, like your body was tense all night without you realizing it. I brushed it off as stress, maybe I just wasn't used to the quiet yet. Back home, I lived in a city, surrounded by constant background noise, cars, voices, distant sirens. Out here, the silence was almost overwhelming. I spent most of the day trying to distract myself. Took a walk through the woods, cooked a real breakfast for once, and even sat on the porch for a while, watching the trees sway in the wind. But I couldn't shake this feeling. Like something was watching me. Every so often, I'd catch myself glancing toward the tree line, expecting to see. I don't know. A deer? A bear? Something. But there was never anything there. Just the dense forest, stretching out endlessly in every direction. By the time night rolled around, I was feeling uneasy again. The inside of the cabin had that same heavy stillness as before, like the air was pressing down on me. The only sound was the crackling of the fireplace as I sat in the old wooden chair, scrolling through old pictures on my phone. No service, of course. Then, just as I was starting to doze off. Knock. Knock. I sat up so fast I nearly dropped my phone. It was coming from the front door. A slow, deliberate knocking. 2 knocks. Then silence. I just sat there, staring at the door, heart pounding. It was nearly midnight. There was no reason for anyone to be out here. The closest town was over 20 miles away, and the cabin was practically hidden in the trees. I waited. My brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe a branch had hit the door. Knock. Knock. Louder this time. I swallowed hard and forced myself to move. Slowly, I stood up, making my way toward the door. Every step felt heavy. My breath felt too loud. I reached the door and hesitated. My hand hovered over the knob. Maybe it's just someone lost. Maybe a hiker. A hunter. I held my breath and leaned forward, peering through the small peephole. Nothing. I frowned. The porch light was on, casting a pale yellow glow over the front steps. But the space in front of the door was completely empty. I waited. My heart was thudding against my ribs. Then I slowly unlocked the door and pulled it open just an inch. The cold air rushed in, but there was no one there. The porch was empty. The trees stood still. The dirt path leading to the cabin was undisturbed. I stepped outside cautiously, glancing around. Maybe I'm losing it. And then I noticed something. Right there, in the dirt, just in front of the door. 2 footprints. Deep, pressed into the soil. Large. Barefoot. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. The prints were fresh. But there was no one around. No sign of anyone walking away. Just 2 deep footprints, and nothing else. I backed up and slammed the door shut, locking it. My hands were shaking. I stood there for a long time, just listening. Silence. Nothing happened for the rest of the night. No more knocks. No sounds outside. But I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those footprints. Because the more I thought about them, the more I realized. They weren't shaped right. The next morning, I stepped outside to check the ground again. I don't even know what I was expecting to find. Maybe the footprints would be gone, maybe I'd convinced myself I imagined them. But they were still there. Deep. Unmistakable. And the more I looked at them, the more wrong they seemed. They were too big for a normal human foot. The shape was strange too, like the toes were too long, slightly spread apart, and almost clawed at the ends. But the worst part? There were only 2 prints. No trail leading to the door, no path leading away. Just 2 heavy, planted steps, and nothing else. I didn't know what to do with that information. I spent most of the day trying to shake the uneasy feeling that was growing inside me. I kept telling myself it was just some weird trick of the light, maybe an animal stepping strangely. But I didn't really believe it. By evening, I had this overwhelming feeling of being watched again. Every time I stepped outside, I felt exposed, like something was standing just beyond the tree line, hidden between the trunks, watching me. I locked every door, checked every window, and sat by the fireplace, trying to focus on a book. But my mind wouldn't settle. Every little creak of the house made my skin crawl. And then, just like the night before. Knock. Knock. I froze. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. I looked at the door, my whole body tensed. Knock. Knock. Louder. More insistent. I forced myself to stand up, moving as quietly as I could. My heart was slamming in my chest as I stepped toward the door. I didn't open it this time. Instead, I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just like before. The porch was empty. The trees stood still. But then. Knock. 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 My breath caught in my throat. The sound didn't come from the front door this time. It came from the back of the house. I turned sharply, feeling my stomach drop. The cabin had a small back door that led to an overgrown yard, right where the woods thickened. I hadn't even used that door since I got here. I moved cautiously toward the back door, my whole body stiff, trying to keep my breathing steady. I reached the door and hesitated, my hand hovering over the knob. Silence. I exhaled slowly. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe. Knock. 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 I jumped back. That wasn't on the door. That was on the window right next to me. I felt my blood turn to ice. The window had thin curtains, but in the dim light, I could see a shape standing on the other side. Tall. Motionless. I didn't look. I couldn't. I backed away slowly, my entire body trembling. After what felt like forever, I reached the staircase and crept up to the second floor. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat in the dark, gripping a fireplace poker in my hands, barely breathing. I don't know how long I sat there, heart pounding, ears straining for any sound. Eventually, the knocking stopped. But I didn't move. Not until the first slivers of dawn started creeping through the windows. Only then did I work up the courage to go downstairs. I checked the porch. Nothing. The back door. Nothing. Then I went to the window where I had seen the shape. My stomach twisted. Right there, pressed against the glass, was a single, wet handprint. But the fingers were too long. And there were only 3 of them. I don't know why I stayed. I should have packed my things and left that morning. But I kept telling myself there had to be a rational explanation. I didn't want to believe that something wrong was happening. I spent the entire day checking every inch of the house. I made sure every door was locked, every window shut tight. The handprint on the glass had dried by then, but I could still see the faint outline, 3 long, unnatural fingers. I wiped it away with my sleeve, as if erasing it would make last night's events disappear. By the time night came, I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I kept pacing the house, my nerves on edge. The silence wasn't comforting anymore, it was suffocating. And then, right around midnight. Knock. Knock. I squeezed my eyes shut. Not again. The knocks were different this time. Slower. Heavier. I forced myself to move, creeping toward the peephole, my breath coming in shallow gasps. My hands were sweating as I leaned forward and... nothing. Of course. Of course. I turned away, swallowing the lump in my throat. I needed to keep calm. Then. Crash. The sound of shattering glass exploded through the cabin. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance. It came from the living room. I bolted forward, my pulse hammering in my ears. The front window was broken, jagged shards of glass littered the wooden floor. Cold night air poured in through the hole. I stood there, frozen. My whole body was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. I was waiting for something, anything, to happen. And then... Moo. The sound crawled through the air like it was coming from everywhere at once. A deep, horrible, guttural noise, stretched and distorted. It wasn't a normal animal sound, it was too long, too unnatural. It was like someone was trying to mimic a cow's call but didn't quite understand how human vocal cords worked. The breath hitched in my throat. Something was outside. I had to get out of sight. Now. I turned and bolted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. I ran into the first room I saw and slammed the door shut, pressing my back against it. My hands fumbled for the lock, click. Silence. I pressed my ear to the door, barely breathing. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the wind, whistling through the broken window downstairs. Then, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Inside the house. I clamped a hand over my mouth, biting back a whimper. The footsteps were heavy, each step groaning against the old wooden floor. It was inside. I slid to the floor, my hands shaking. I needed to think. I needed a plan. Then I remembered, the window. The broken window. My stomach dropped. I'd locked myself in here, but it didn't need doors. It had a way in. I turned, heart pounding, and looked at the room's window. The glass reflected the dim moonlight, casting shadows across the floor. Was it out there? Watching? Then. A shadow moved. Tall. Too tall. My breath stopped. The shape loomed just beyond the window, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Even in the darkness, I could see its outline, thin, elongated limbs, a stretched-out torso, and a head that was all wrong. A snout. Like a pig. Or a cow. But it didn't move like an animal. It stood too still. Too human. I was paralyzed. My body refused to listen to me. And then, without warning, it sprinted toward the window. I didn't even think. I threw myself to the side just as. Crash. The window shattered inward, glass spraying across the floor. The thing hit the floor hard, its body twisting unnaturally as it landed. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I tore down the hallway, my bare feet slapping against the wood. I didn't even know where I was going, just away. Behind me, I heard it move. Fast. Its footsteps were wrong, uneven, almost galloping. It let out another deep, horrible moo that made my insides twist. I hit the staircase and took the steps 2 at a time, nearly tripping over myself. I had to get out. I didn't care where, I just needed to get out of that house. That I hit the bottom of the staircase and nearly slipped, catching myself on the wooden railing. My whole body was shaking, adrenaline flooding my veins. It was upstairs. I could hear it moving, fast. Hooves or feet, or something in between, hammering against the floorboards as it twisted and lunged through the narrow hallway. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I ran straight for the front door, hands scrambling at the locks. Come on, come on, come on. Then. Thud. The sound came from directly above me. It had jumped. I didn't think. I dove to the side just as. Crack. The ceiling above the front door caved inward, wooden beams splintering as something massive came crashing down. A cloud of dust and debris exploded into the air. I barely registered what I saw: long, thin limbs, bent at unnatural angles. The glint of something wet and black in the dim light. The thing had jumped straight through the ceiling like it weighed nothing. I scrambled backward, my palms scraping against the rough wooden floor. My lungs felt too tight, like I couldn't breathe. The dust started to settle. The thing was crouched in the wreckage, its head tilted toward me. It was even worse up close. Its body was wrong. Too stretched. Too thin. A long, bony torso with ribs that jutted out like they were barely covered in skin. Its arms hung too low, almost dragging against the floor, ending in long, clawed fingers. But the head, God, the head. It was like a cow's skull, but stretched. Hollow eye sockets. A too long snout. Patches of dark, leathery skin clinging to it. And its mouth. It was open. Too open. I don't know how else to describe it. The jaw was hanging loose, like it had dislocated itself just to gape at me. Inside, I could see rows of teeth, too many, uneven and jagged, crammed together like they didn't belong in the same mouth. And then, it made that sound again. Moo. Long, warbling, unnatural. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then, it moved. It lunged forward, limbs twisting, too fast. I barely rolled out of the way before its hand slammed down where I had been sitting. The wood splintered under its weight. I scrambled backward, kicking frantically, my hands searching for anything, to use as a weapon. My fingers hit cold steel. The axe. I didn't think. I grabbed it, swinging wildly as I scrambled to my feet. The blade sliced through empty air as the thing jerked back unnaturally fast. But I didn't stop. I swung again. This time, the axe hit. It buried deep into its shoulder with a sickening crunch. The thing screamed. Not a moo. Not a howl. Something in between. A horrible, broken noise that made my head feel like it was splitting open. It staggered back, twisting its body, pulling itself off the blade. Thick, dark fluid oozed from the wound, but it didn't slow down. I turned and ran. Not for the door, it was still blocked by broken beams and debris. The window. The same broken window it had come through. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted, heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear it behind me, its breathing wet and ragged, its footsteps thudding too fast. I didn't stop. I ran full speed and threw myself through the broken window. Glass sliced into my arms and legs as I tumbled onto the cold dirt outside. The air rushed from my lungs as I hit the ground hard. I gasped, scrambling to my feet. Behind me, inside the house, I heard a thud. Then silence. I turned, breath heaving, axe still gripped tight in my hands. The house was still. But I knew, it wasn't over. Somewhere inside, in the darkness, it was still there. And it was still watching me. I didn't waste a second. As soon as I hit the ground, I ran. The forest was pitch black, the trees forming jagged silhouettes against the night sky. I didn't care where I was going, I just knew I had to get away from that house. Behind me, inside, I could hear it moving. The sound of wood creaking, something heavy shifting. And then, crash. I risked a glance over my shoulder just in time to see the thing hurling itself through the broken window. My stomach dropped. It landed on the ground in a way that no living thing should. Its limbs bent wrong, its torso twisting unnaturally before snapping back into place. And then, it turned its head toward me. Even in the dark, I could see its empty, gaping mouth. And then, it ran. Not stumbled, not crawled. It sprinted. A horrible, jerking motion, its long arms dragging behind it, its hooked feet slamming against the dirt. I ran faster. Branches tore at my arms and face as I barreled through the trees. My lungs burned. My legs felt like they would give out at any second. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I could hear it behind me. Getting closer. Its footsteps weren't normal. They were erratic, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes impossibly close when they shouldn't have been. Then, moo. The sound rang through the forest, warbling and unnatural. Too close. It wasn't behind me anymore. It was ahead of me. I skidded to a stop, nearly losing my footing. The trees in front of me looked the same as the rest, dark and towering, but something felt wrong. Then I saw it. A shadow. Tall. Thin. Standing between the trees. I didn't have time to think. I swung the axe, wildly, desperately, but the thing just moved. Not stepped. Moved. Like it flickered. Like my eyes couldn't keep up with where it was supposed to be. Then, pain. White-hot agony exploded through my leg. I hit the ground hard, my vision flashing white. Something had grabbed me. I kicked, twisted, my heart slamming against my ribs, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't see what was holding me. I swung the axe blindly. The blade hit something solid. A horrible, inhuman scream tore through the trees. The grip on my leg vanished. I didn't stop to look. I pushed myself up, ignoring the throbbing pain in my leg, and kept running. The trees started to thin. A clearing. I pushed harder, my breath ragged, legs screaming in protest. Then, the trees broke open, and I saw a road. A long, narrow stretch of pavement, empty and silent in the moonlight. I didn't stop. I ran straight for it, barely registering the pain in my body. And then, silence. I turned, gasping, eyes darting wildly across the tree line. Nothing. The forest was still. No movement. No sound. Like nothing had ever been there. I stood there, frozen, my entire body trembling. And then I realized. It let me go that I stood on the side of the road, my entire body trembling, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My lungs burned, my legs ached, and my hands were still clutching the axe so tightly my fingers had gone numb. But the forest behind me was silent. No footsteps. No moaning, warbling cries. No sign that the thing had ever been there. I didn't trust it. I backed away from the tree line, my heart still hammering, expecting to see it again, that tall, twisted silhouette, those empty sockets locked onto me. But nothing moved. It was gone. Or worse, it was still watching, just waiting for me to come back. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to wait around to find out. I turned and started limping down the road, barely able to keep myself upright. I had no idea where I was going, but I didn't care, I just needed to get as far away from that house as possible. The night was cold now, colder than it should have been. Every sound made me flinch, the rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl. And then, in the distance, headlights. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. But as I stumbled forward, I realized it was real, a pair of headlights coming from the bend ahead, the faint roar of an approaching engine. I was in the middle of the road. I waved my arms, nearly collapsing from the effort. The car slowed. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I thought, I might actually make it out of this. I don't remember much after that. The driver, some older guy named Rick, helped me into his truck. I must have looked like hell because he kept asking if I'd been attacked, if I needed a hospital, if he should call the cops. I just kept shaking my head. I didn't even know what I would have told them. The house. The thing. The way it ran at me, too fast, too wrong. No one would believe me. Rick drove me straight into town, to a tiny gas station off the highway. He wanted to call the cops anyway, but I begged him not to. I just needed a phone. I don't know how to start this without sounding insane. But I need to get it out because even though this happened months ago, it still lingers in my mind. Some nights, I wake up gasping for air, convinced I can hear that sound again, that deep, awful, unnatural noise that still makes my skin crawl. I don't know what I saw out there, I don't want to know, but I know it was real. Last fall, I rented a cabin deep in the woods of Montana. I found it online, listed for an absurdly low price. The pictures made it look kind of nice, in that rustic, secluded way, 2 stories, wooden paneling, surrounded by towering pine trees. It had a fireplace, an old wooden staircase, and a little front porch with a single rocking chair. I'd been dealing with a lot of stress at the time, work,